person and you're online, thank you so very, very much for joining us. My name is Francisca. I am the Director and Associate Dean of the JHBC Office of Academic Equity. So what we are going to do today is just talk about the high impact practices. But before doing so, I want to give you an idea of why we are talking about HIPs and what we hope to accomplish with those high impact practice. Next. So here's the first slide, and here's today's agenda. Very, very briefly, a couple of minutes about the Office of Academic Equity. Then very, very briefly, we will talk about the equity gap. And then, of course, my colleagues will just jump on this and talk about high impact practice and then Q&A. Okay, so let's get started with the office. So some of you already know, and if you do not, please join us. I mean, we are trying to do a very good job. If you go on our website, which is listed here at the bottom of the slide, you will have all the information about the office, why we are committed to DEI, and also some information about the demographic of the college. You will also find information about the faculty that we call the advocates. Those are faculty that really wanted to collaborate directly with the office because of their commitment to equity. Although I say because, I know everybody is committed to equity, but they just wanted to do a little bit more. And then you will have information about the student translator. You will find a fact sheet. We try to put, Marina and I, a fact sheet so everybody is aware of what the office does. And you will have a calendar, of all the events we are planning, and calendar of event. We also summarize event so you can share online, what we have done. So here's an example, for instance, of the fact sheet. That's the old fact sheet. Oh no, excuse me, that's the calendar. That's the calendar. That's an example of the calendar. So you know what will be coming. Now, today, the goal of this gathering today is to talk about the high impact practices. So I wanted to put this in context by letting you know that in the College of Business and Public Administration, we have a task force, and this task force has established an administration assessment test, an AA test. The test includes 70 questions, and there's 10 questions for each of the disciplines that we have in the college. So if you look at the second bullet point, the goal is to evaluate the knowledge of our core undergraduate discipline. So we're talking about accounting, finance, information system technology, management, marketing, PA, and supply chain. So there's 7 disciplines, 70 questions, 10 questions per discipline. We administer that test to undergraduate students the last term of the senior year. And since every student is required to take management at 4,900, it's a perfect place to do so. MBA students also administer that test, and this is in another class, 6980, as you can see there. So if you look at the third bullet point, because if I point it, you cannot see. But if you look at the third bullet point, the idea is for our student to have a score of 60, so 6 out of 10 on each subsection. Right? So it's not a question of having 100 here and then failing something else. It just should be each. Right? And of course, the ideal, right, what we hope is to have students that will score 80, right, on each subsection. So there is a committee, that the committee include members from each department. And in my department in finance, we have Kevin Go, right, who is the representative. And I was talking with him yesterday, and as he stated, and I really agree, the goal is not to point to a class where students are not doing well. Just the goal is to have general information so we can all do better and see what can we do, right? And in fact, I need to tell you, it is in finance, which I'm a finance professor, that students are not performing the best. So, but it's good to take a look and say, what can I do? What can we do? So I want to show you the next slide that, thank you, Kevin, shared with me yesterday. So there is a big document. So we have a specific learning goal, right? And we have enough data now to evaluate a little bit better the first learning goal. And the first learning goal is specific knowledge and skills. And this table that you have here just disaggregate the data so we can have a little bit more information about what we need to do. So as you can see, you know, we disaggregate by your gender. The sample is 558 students. So again, you know, we're making progress, right? I mean, this is already a sample that I think we can start talking about. And then we disaggregate data per the student demographic, like the first generation student that are transferring, international student. Then we have Hispanic or Latino, Black, African-American, white student, and then domestic student versus other race. And then in the table, you have the average. So I mentioned a minute ago that the minimum is 60, right? So we hope students will get a minimum of 60, and ideal, of course, is 80. So, but if you look very quickly at the number, and today is not, you know, the time to analyze this, but I wanted to put this in context so you understand we have a gap, right? And if you can see here, again, thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing this information with me. So if you look at African-American Black student in finance, as I was saying a minute ago, right? I put the number in red, it's 56.5%. So if you compare that number with, let's say, another ethnic group like a domestic student with other race all the way down, or international student, a little bit higher, which is 82.7%. That's what we talk of. That's what we mean by the gap. It's that simple. It's the gap. Okay. So again, we could have another meeting, right, when we devote more time talking and looking at the question, right, because this is important. But bottom line here, so when we talk about the gap, the equity gap, that's what we are referring to. Next, please. And then next, please. It's not. Here we go. You can go to the next one, because this one is the same. It's just look at MBA. So one way to close the gap, and we are all searching. I mean, you know, 20 years ago, we didn't talk about this, even if some of the practices were well known, is to use the high impact practices. And I'm going to let my colleague, Dr. Podolske, first, I think. Oh, no, I think it's going to be
Tom's first.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. No problem. Sorry. Okay, first talking about those hips because they're the expert. And my goal here, and thank you, Anna and Marina, was just to, you know, bring them here to just give us some information. So here the expert, Dr. Diane Podolske, who is the Office of Community Engagement Director, a 20-year friend of mine. She's fabulous. She is just fabulous. And then Dr. Thomas Girshin.
Also present.
So, you know, we wanted to bring those two because there is the high impact practices as understood by most of the colleges, by ACLU, by the university, and then there is the CSUSB, right, which kind of has a little bit different. So thank you for being here, and here they are.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. Should I just
If you want to sit here, you can sit here.
Yeah, sure, or I could just take the keyboard.
Whichever is easier for you.
Well, thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome.
I don't know if I'll live up to the expert part. I'm an expert in writing intensive pedagogy, but I've in doing that I've done a lot of studying and thinking about high impact practices as well. So what I hope overall is that this will be useful to you all. It seems like from from your introduction that there are sort of a lot of things kind of in play at the same time as far as equity gaps, and I would be interested in hearing more about the exam too, and where that came from, the assessment, and how that was developed and that sort of thing. So I hope that we will have plenty of time for that kind of discussion. And I also hope, in the interest of this being useful to you, if I'm starting to talk about something that is really not what you want to be talking about, or you know, just raise your hand or interrupt me and say, well, you know, let's actually talk about this. I'm happy to pivot and be flexible that way. But the questions that I had sort of planned to talk about are, what are some productive ways that we can think about learning? And then relatedly, what makes something a high impact practice? And the idea is that high impact practices are meant to have that impact on what? Well, impact on learning. That's the idea, that these have a higher impact on the quality of learning for students than other pedagogical practices. So what are some productive ways to think about learning? Well, on one hand, we have sort of learning on the level of conceptual knowledge, disciplinary knowledge. You know, E equals MC squared, or acceleration due to gravity is 9.8 meters per second. But then we also know that there's a difference between sort of just being able to memorize something and actually being able to understand it, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. So we have something like Bloom's taxonomy, which you're all familiar with, I'm sure, to help us think through that kind of learning, right? Learning that is beyond, that goes beyond rote memorization to application, analysis, and creation, and so on. But then there's also, and this comes from the Council of Writing Program Administrators. So this is from writing studies, but I think it's relevant in a lot of disciplines. And this is learning on the level of disposition, habits of mind. Often what's interesting when I have conversations with people is in the liberal arts, but also a lot in business, I feel like people in industry, when you read things about what people in industry are looking for, they're often not just talking about content, right? Knowing like finance, I don't know anything about finance. So knowing like how to do a spreadsheet or something like that, which hopefully I didn't get it too wrong. But things like curiosity, persistence, creativity, flexibility. So things that are not content related, but are more about disposition. So that's another way of thinking about learning. Oh, I will check. Is this chat?
Yes.
Is this current?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he was after
So this is Ambrose et al. In their influential book, How Learning Works, define learning this way. Learning is a process that leads to change, which occurs as a result of experience and increases the potential for improved performance and future learning. So it's a process, and it leads to some sort of perceived and typically measurable change. And that change is recursive, right? So it's not just an immediate change, but it stays with you and it affects other ways of engaging your studies. And you can look at that in terms of content knowledge, things like threshold concepts, which once you get them, we were just talking about this in the workshop I was just coming from. Once you get something that's specific to the field, it changes the way you think about the field in general. And you can also look at it in terms of disposition, right? Once you know how to value curiosity, you become a more curious person, and that affects the way that you engage with all kinds of things. So what does that all have to do with high impact practices? these are the high impact practices that are accepted or publicized by the AAC&U. And I know that your accrediting body maybe has a different set, maybe overlapping, maybe different set of high impact practices. Where did these come from? These came from a study by George Koo and others along with him that basically looked at the survey data from the National Survey of Student Engagement, the NSSE. And when they analyzed that data and they looked for correlations between what students were reporting as what students were involved in that were also reporting high levels of engagement, these are the practices that emerged. So students that were engaged in first-year seminars and experiences, learning communities, writing intensive courses, of course, undergraduate research, service, community-based learning, as Diane will talk about, and other things that you see up there. Students that were engaged in those also, or involved in those, also reported high levels of engagement. So that's it. It's a correlation. It's a review of this big body of statistical data and looking for those correlations. That's where these high impact practices came out of. So in a later study, that was 2008, I think in a later study, 2013, Koo looks a little bit deeper, and but still this is self-reported. And so I will, at the top, he has listed deep learning, general gains, personal gains, and practical gains. And then going down the left-hand side, learning community, service learning, and then at the that's in the first year, and then at the senior year, study abroad, student faculty research, internships, service learning, and senior culminating experience. Again, these are self-reported. So if you are a student in your first year who reported being involved in a learning community, did you also report a high level of deep learning or general gains or personal gains or practical gains? And then you can see the p-values down on the bottom. So those of you who know statistics much better than I do can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of this is that one plus sign means that it's at least, or it's less than 1% probability that it had an impact, up to greater than a 30% probability that it had an impact at the 3+. So something like service learning on deep learning in the first year, there was at least a 30% probability that there would be a self-reported impact on that. I may want to correct my reading of that, because I'm happy to learn something there. And then just breaking that down a little further, these same categories on the left, but different categories at the top: level of academic challenge, active and collaborative learning, student faculty interaction, supportive campus environment. And you see similar breakdowns on the left-hand side. So zeroing in on business a little bit, there was also, we could highlight this category too, professional, depending on how sort of what's grouped in JHBC. But I just thought I would highlight business since I had high confidence that would be relevant here. So so this is percent participation. So if you look at business majors, and this is national data, this is not CSUSB, this is national data. If you look at business majors, 17% were involved in a learning community, 41% in service learning, 10% in student faculty research, 14% in study abroad, 40%. Why is service learning? Okay. First year. Yeah, thank you. I confused myself. So the senior year versus the first year. So service learning, 40% in the senior year, internships 39%, and then a culminating senior experience.
So this is undergraduate.
This is undergraduate, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I did not look into it at the graduate level. I could. I'm not sure what's out there. Most of this research has been done at the graduate level. I don't know if you're familiar with more of that. Yeah.
So are these numbers cumulative or not? Because first year is 41% for service learning. And then service learning as senior is 40%.
So when they did this study, it was your first year, did you do this?
Okay.
Your senior year, whatever that is,
Yeah.
fourth, fifth year, whatever. Yeah. In this particular study.
And again, this also all comes from the NESI
Mhm.
survey.
Mhm.
Did you have a follow-up?
No.
No? Okay.
Sorry, you mentioned
Yeah.
which survey does that?
The National Survey on Student Engagement
Okay.
and NSSE.
Is it like an open source where you can?
Oh, yeah, you can access and there's all kinds of reports. If you go to, I think the best portal is probably the AACNU for that. I don't know if there's a place that you like to go. IUPUI also has,
okay.
IUPUI Institute on Assessment also has lots of great stuff on that.
Oh,
And institutional research on our campus has holds
Yes.
our data. for
Yes.
us.
oh,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good stuff.
It's a good stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can go to like Tableau on our
Yeah,
website and they have
Yeah.
all kinds of things.
right.
Yeah.
Even just lean it right here, that would be great.
Say that again?
Yep.
Oh, I don't think that's for us.
Drive safe out there. No, I'm great.
It won't let me.
Can you meet?
Thank you.
There we go. Okay, so in this same study, the one that
Yeah,
I
right.
just
Ridiculous.
showed, that data from before,
Have one.
they, I think,
Yeah.
I don't, okay, there we go. Now it's muted. But then.
No, it's not.
Yeah, well, I
No,
don't
that's
know
weird.
why it won't let me do it. I'll keep going though.
Yeah, go
in the meantime. So when they drill down a little further and say, okay, well, obviously there's nothing in a label, right? There's nothing in a label that's going to have this impact. There's something going on in the course that is leading to this impact. And these 8 characteristics is what they were finding. That high performance expectations, regardless of which category of HIP. In other words, these were the things that were found across the board as having an impact on self-reported levels of student engagement. High performance expectations, significant investment of student time and effort over an extended period. High quality interactions with faculty and peers. Exposure to and contention with people and circumstances that differ from those with which students are familiar. In other words, unfamiliar situations. Frequent, timely, and constructive feedback. We talk about this a lot in writing intensive pedagogy. Periodic structured opportunities to reflect and integrate your learning. Opportunities to discover relevance of learning through real world applications. That's probably something that happens a lot, I would imagine, in business. And public demonstration of competence. Conferences, presentations, things like that probably also happen a lot here. So those are the kinds of the qualities of HIPs that make them effective, that could be introduced in a class that is not designated necessarily a HIP, right? And that a class that is designated a HIP ought to be trying to emphasize at least some of these in order to actually have the impact that you want to have. Who writes in that same study, in the final analysis, what an activity is called, and that's what I was alluding to just now, may not matter as long as students who participate in it perform at high levels and are satisfied enough with their experience to continue and complete their studies. A lot of this is about retention, persistence, right? Are students gonna keep going with their studies? The more engaged you rate yourself, the more likely you are to keep going. Yeah, okay, that's my last slide. I guess just to sort of wrap things up, I think it would be great to hear more about what you all are doing in your classes and how those kinds of things resonate or don't. Yeah.
It's gonna be my
Okay.
slide jockey for me. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but I have.
That's okay.
Take care.
All right, well, you may be saying to yourself, okay, Diane, sounds great. Let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready. I want to do community engagement. I just want to remind you that we have an office on campus that is set up and ready to help. There's one on every CSU campus. The CSU is the largest service learning system in the world. It's really a point of pride. You can move on to the next slide, please. We do have money available to help you. In addition to having fantastic staff, nothing says support like cash. And so we have money available to help you form a partnership. If you want to do research in the community, which is actually a two-shot for it counts as community engagement and it also counts as student research. So that's a double hit. You get twice your value out of that one, and or service learning, which is service as part of a course. Next slide, please. And then we will reward you handsomely with a faculty awards. We also award to our community partners for all their help as co-educators. Next slide. All right, here's what I really want to talk about for just a moment today. Part of where we struggle as a campus and part of where we struggle as the CSU is we're doing a lot of great work. And many of the things, and Tom said this so well, probably fit in a HIP category, but we haven't necessarily found the definitions and found a way to assess, is this indeed a high impact practice? You know, what does it mean when you say student research? We talk about research in a class. Is that enough of a dose? Does a student do a research project in the class? Does the student have to be a part of a research team? Is it something that is a few weeks during a semester? Is it something that's a few months? Is it a summer intensive experience? What counts, right? What counts? And then how do we document that? And so the folks in community engagement spent 2 years in a committee hashing through this, and we did a pilot test which failed miserably, and then we came back again and did another pilot test, and now we're ready to go. We're ready to implement. And here is finally one way that we can document community engagement HIP. I'm also here to say that there are several of us who are on the HIPS committee. I've been on it for, I think, 8 or 9 years now. We're working on that as for all the high impact practices. So even though this one I'm going to describe today as an example, is coming for the other HIPs. Eventually we're going to get there. We're sort of starting with things that are maybe a little easier just to get started, and then we're going to work on the tougher ones as we get going. So quickly, service learning has been a course attribute for community engaged courses, and this is kind of the picture is an example of how it looks on the class schedule. You'll see the course attribute service learning. This new effort that we're doing is going to find those folks out in the university who are actually doing service learning, but they just never called it that. And we have a way now to quantify it and then get it in the course schedule. And it's called the CEL Attribute Initiative Program because we love an acronym, right? Okay, next slide. All right, what took almost the 2 years of the committee work was coming up with a definition. What are we actually talking about? And it alludes to what I was mentioning earlier about what counts as research, what counts as study abroad. Does virtual study abroad count the same as actually physically going to Italy, actually living abroad for a year? What does that mean? And the same thing we struggled with for service learning. As you might imagine, anybody who goes out into the community was marking, I'm doing service learning. Even if they had, well, I have an extra credit assignment that some students do, and I ask them to attend a community theater project or a performance, or I ask them to volunteer at a community event. I don't really care what it is, just so they prove that they've done it. And so I'm doing service learning, and that isn't necessarily true. So we spent all this time and came up with the 2 definitions, which is based on research, which is based on hashing out every single word of this. So we know that this is it. 2 designations. There's community service learning, which is part of the pedagogy of the class. It's obvious to the student that there it is, right? It says it in the syllabus. This is a service learning class. It's part of the learning goals. There is something that happens in the community. There's a reflection component. And really the bottom line is it contributes to the public good. Or equally good, just different, is community engaged learning that happens in a class, but it could be a lot of things that happen in the community, like a practica, an internship, that we're having some kind of a community experience, but it's just as we may just be observers. We may, or maybe the benefit is to me, like if I'm an intern, yeah, maybe the place gets a little bit of a benefit, but really it's the benefit is to me as the learner, and they're nice enough to host me, right? So the first one, it really is the two-way, everybody benefits, especially the community. The second one is we're in the community, but not necessarily the benefit. Next slide. All right, here's the $1 million slide right here. This is what took 2 years. We developed a survey tool. First of all, we came up with a taxonomy, which we argued about for months, but we've now settled on it. And we've developed a survey tool, and on the right-hand side, you'll see it's online. We asked the faculty member to sit down with their syllabus and sit down with the survey tool. It takes 15 minutes, and it really is kind of a checklist. Does your syllabus have this? Does your course include this? ... And it figures it out for you, and it'll send you an email saying, great, you have a community engaged learning class, or you've met the criteria for service learning. Both are valuable. Both are equally important. There isn't a value difference in the analysis. We just are trying to figure out who's doing what. That's all it is. It's putting it into categories. Let's say you get the survey and you say, Diane, this really is a service learning course. My syllabus needs to be updated. No problem. When this comes back, it comes to me and it comes to the faculty member. We can go back through, we can look at the syllabus, we can look at what you're doing, we can add in what needs to be added in. Take the survey again, comes out with service learning, because that is actually what's happening. That's what then goes to the chancellor's office and then goes into the course. Got it, right? When you're done, I will send you an official letter saying that you have a service learning class or you have a community engaged learning class according to the chancellor's office rubric. Yes.
A different instructor may teach the class differently
Right.
for the same class.
Right. It's
That be a
by instructor, by course,
section.
and by section. Right. It's by section. Yeah. Yes.
So are you going to replicate and forward their course syllabus to you to do the comparison?
It's better if the faculty member does it, because you know the intention of the course. Yeah. Most folks, sometimes when you sit down with your syllabus and you're looking at the checklist, you're like, I say this in class, but I don't necessarily have it written in my syllabus. I can change my syllabus.
Okay.
And it's better that that happens at the faculty level. Again, now there are some courses though, that's a really good point, Anna, where no matter who teaches the class, it's going to be this.
Yeah.
And for example, a good example of that might be in social work.
Yeah.
When they have a practica, it may be at a different place focusing on a different issue, but it will be interaction with clients, it will be managing a caseload, it will be this. And so we could fill it out for the whole course, course level. So both ways. Yeah. The part of this that's great is that it takes 15 minutes and all the work's been done. It just lets you do it. And then from there, we can share it with the college to say, according to the chancellor's office, no. Here are your courses that are service learning. Here are your courses that are community engaged learning. The reason why I say that both of those are valuable is that it may be true that your freshman level courses, all you want them to do is to go out into the community. They may not be ready to do really intensive stuff in the community, right? They just may not be ready. And again, I'm not making a comment about anybody, but I know that sometimes our first year students come to me with phrases like, I'm afraid of homeless people. You know, I've never done this before. You know, I only want to go with a friend, and even then I'm not sure. We don't have to force people out into this, you know, the deep end of community engaged work. Let's build a scaffold, right? Let's start somewhere and then move to something else. It's just like you don't do an internship your first year because you just don't have the preparation that you need in order to be successful in an internship placement. Same thing. That's why it's equally valuable. I think sometimes people get hung up on, well, it is, or, you know, it's not as good or somehow secondary. No. All good and probably all appropriate for different phases of the student's life at the university. Makes sense. Okay, next slide. Is that it? All right. You know what? I said a lot of words and I'm trying to look at the screen and look at all of you, but you're never alone. I am definitely here to help. This should be something where you feel supported and encouraged and celebrated. And I will do my very best to lift your community engaged work to your college department chair, to your dean, to the provost, who is very supportive. This is also a very valuable part of your RPT documentation in terms of innovation in teaching. And I would definitely encourage you to include that letter in any kind of either evaluative, if you're not part of the RPT process, or if you're going for tenure, that this is a component of that to demonstrate that not only do I say I'm doing innovative teaching, but I have proof. I have proof. I am doing it, and I'm doing it at this level, or I'm doing it at another level, and it's both equally valuable. And I am happy to, yes, there you go, Michelle. And I think that's true of a number of folks, and thank you for pulling that up. Thank you. That my classes should be service learning, and I will be sending to you if that's okay. We're going to be sharing these slides, and I will include the link to the survey, Michelle, and anyone else who's interested. And definitely be happy to follow up with you as well to get you through that process. Again, 15 minutes per class, no longer. Some people whiz through it even faster, but I think anything that when you've invested the time to do something in the community and you've done that good work and you care about your students and wanting them to have that experience, then you should also receive the benefit for your documentation, and your college and department should also be recognized for that outstanding engagement work. And please help me do that. This is also coming for other, yes, I'll get you 1 second. This is also coming for the other types of high impact practices. I think there's in the very near future, there's going to be something for internships. I think in the near future, there's going to be something for study abroad, because those are kind of defined. Yes, you can kind of understand, well, study abroad is this. Writing intensive, obviously Tom's working on some of the other capstone experiences. Those are easy to understand. Some of the things are a little harder to, cooperative learning and all that is a little bit furrier, and so we'll have to think about how we're going to designate that. One last thing before I give up my podium, and this is I obviously happy to talk with anybody at any time, but I always want to say this because I saw it on your slide. Please try not to use the word community service. Please try not to. Please try not to. And please try to encourage your students not to use the word community service or put it on your resume, even more importantly. I'm going through resumes right now where I see students who have a community service title. And community service is court-ordered service to many employers. And so if you do have community service, you should not put that on your resume. And if you mean something else, you should more accurately label it as community engagement or volunteer service or something like that. So I see that in your accreditation and I think we can make a point of trying to encourage our students to understand the professional benefits of service and to not sell themselves short by using the wrong word. Accidentally. Yeah. So Anna, yes.
I do have a question, because in the past I tried to apply for a community service course for one of my class. The problem is that I remember at that time they require you have a kind of a community organization that you are working with. My problem is that I have students, for example, they go to their city's economic development agency, but it's different. It's not their own cities. So it's not a single kind of a community organization. Is this community engagement requirement also you have to identify the specifics? No. Then that makes life so much easier.
Yeah. No, you don't have to give up your partner's name, or you don't have to have the same partner all the time.
Then that's good. Good to know that.
Yeah.
I also have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
I was eating. Thank you so much, Diane. We have a group of students that we call the trendsetters.
Yes,
And those students have been chosen because they're really committed to changing the college, right? Making sure that people feel welcome, that they belong. And we select them based on an essay. Listening to you, I was wondering if that will not be a class, right? But if that group of students could also participate in this type of program, and if I could work with you, maybe
sure.
to just add that, right? Because that will be a very good component to add. Is that something, is it possible, even if it's not a regular class? It's not a class.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know we have a number of students that help with Coyote Cares Day.
Right.
How should they document that on their resume?
Great. So we just had Coyote Cares Day. That was this past weekend. Thank you, Twyla, for volunteering. That is 4 hours of service. And I generally would call that volunteer service. And in many ways, experiences like that, if a student has done more service than just that one, I sometimes encourage them to report it in total. I did this many hours during this year, including Coyote Cares Day, and sort of list out the things that they've done, because I think the larger number is something that will catch a reviewer's eye. Yeah. But yeah, any type of service that your clubs and organizations that are affiliated with the university, those should all be part of. And I'm happy to do a workshop on that for your students if anybody's interested on how to accurately reflect that, because people's time is really valuable. If they're taking time to volunteer, then they should get credit for it.
I think we should. Because student competition is tough right there, right? So whatever they can have that's valuable in their resume, and that is very valuable in your resume. So I think we could definitely plan that. I'm gonna take you on your offer.
Yes. I'm gonna stop talking now.
Stop talking. But I think this is very relevant to business curriculum, because of our instructors probably have a lot of community engagement activities in industry engagement, or whatever you call them in the curriculum. It's just maybe we should learn the service structure and see what would be the best way that we can identify this and get a designation.
Can you actually go back a couple of slides where we're to the definitions page, just so fast.
And we will put the PPT.
So it really is that second one where it's community engaged learning.
Exactly.
That's the new part of what we're doing. It isn't necessarily
service,
public good and reflection and the whole thing that we think about, but it's engagement in the community, just as valuable though.
Yeah, exactly.
Just as valuable. It's just a different thing.
So the faculty still get the same kind of like all the benefits. The student. That's wonderful. And many of those things are what Tom pointed out, which was so great, in engagement with a faculty member on a personal level, and talking with people in the industry and understanding more about career options and like envisioning themselves in a career and understanding what's available and also demonstrating those soft skills or learning soft skills, how to lead a group, how to run a meeting, how to whatever that might be. So
we do that.
If you go back to the chart that with the three pluses, it's in the first slide 17.
Service learning is a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Both 17 and 18. Service learning for both the first year and the senior level is 3s across the board. So these are very impactful opportunities for students. And I wanted to add too that we started off with your introduction talking about equity gaps, and there is research that shows that high impact practices, and especially when you look at the qualities of high impact practices, feedback, high levels of engagement with faculty and peers, those are particularly effective at reducing equity gaps.
That's why I wanted to start with that, because that tied it up together.
So for ASSB, we really emphasize experiential learning. Actually, this is a community engagement learning so some of business curriculum is solely kind of now for innovative curriculum, they're solely based on experiential learning.
And that includes community service learning,
Yes. Mhm.
community engaged learning,
Yeah,
internships,
yes,
apprenticeships.
yeah, they just a whole
co-ops.
curriculum is built around the professional experience that you are going to have when you graduate from a program. So I know some businesses that from the beginning, when you enter that, the whole curriculum is no longer that course based, but it's kind of a cumulative experience based curriculum. It's very interesting. Yeah, that's.
If I could ask, I'm curious about, are there other HIPs that your accrediting body counts as HIPs that aren't on that list?
So we have a little bit different. The reason we call it high impact practices is because business curriculum, they really emphasize positive societal impact. So experiential learning is one of them, majority of them, but also they emphasize that innovation and the society.
Innovation is a high impact practice.
For business.
Can we, maybe we can show you the table that I presented earlier, and then I think there's some questions for Diane.
Then we have to make sure that our curriculum do have. Yes, here, yes, like you address innovation and the societal impact and
research project
mindset. Those are the four areas really emphasizing for ASSE.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so innovation is on the level of course delivery, basically. It's
Yes,
innovation of the
yes.
faculty member.
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
A lifelong learning mindset that
And also
for the
content.
students.
That's also tough to kind of grasp,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Very
and that's
good.
those are those habits of mind.
Yeah.
that,
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
It's kind of related. They
It is
frame it in a
Really cool. Yeah, I think so.
And Michelle, I will get in touch with you. Yes, the survey does tell you which either it's community engaged learning or community service learning. It tells you, and then you have an opportunity to revise if you desire some. But I'll follow up with you. I think part of this list that's fantastic is that they've listed all these words. It's a starting spot, but I'd be really curious on how much work they've done on the definitions of. So when we say this, we are looking for this, or is it up to?
It's up to the
college to make a
demand.
decision?
Yes, actually, the experiential and what we put in 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are actually we identified. We try to identify. Yeah, so it's they leave the privilege for you, but however, they do have a kind of commonly accepted
Sort of a
general
global. Okay, yeah.
And that's true even of the AAC and U definitions too, is that one of the opportunities for further research is when we label something, I don't know, a first year learning community. How are we defining that in different places?
Exactly.
It varies.
Yeah.
Kevin has a question.
Good question.
Kevin?
Hi, sorry, I just feel I don't feel quite well today, so I'm lying on the bed, so I cannot turn on the camera. And the thing here is that, I mean, when we do the learning assessment, is we found the equity gap, and more importantly, we also found the gap between the San Bernardino campus and Pomdel campus. So when we do the survey, or is it possible we can count on how many activity or HIPS activities that were available to PDC students?
Yeah, in the future, I think the university right now, the HIPS committee right now is trying to do that, have some kind of baseline and assessment tool. Yeah,
and it varies from HIP to HIP, I would say, because writing intensive, there's a designation for that, so that's very easy. You can go into PeopleSoft and get that data pretty easily. Other ones like undergraduate research, for example, which is part of your experiential learning, there isn't we're working on that. We're moving toward that, where it would be easy to get that info.
But we're also facing this challenge. I read quite a lot of articles about HIPS, is the equity issue about HIPS. HIPS, because if it's not a curriculum based, then there's a quite equity gap between more privileged groups and more like a URM and Pell students, and how you because they don't have time to and the resources to do, for example, study abroad. Absolutely. And to do so. This equity gap is a big issue about HIPS.
Yes.
So the equalizer is having as part of the curriculum. I mean, that really is the equalizer,
Yeah.
if you can, if it makes sense, is that
That's
it's part of what's required for your major. And also sometimes students are not students at CSUSB, but other places may see something like there's a requirement for research or there's a requirement for service learning in a section, and they'll be like, seems hard, I'm gonna take a different section.
Yeah.
Not here, of course, but other places, and so that's also a sort of a tricky
Yeah.
piece that we need to unravel. Like this is an experience that will be better for you, and so much of this is communication to the students and why this is important. You know, we're not making you do this for no reason, but this is really to benefit you and your career and your learning. And I don't know if enough of that communication is not out to students.
Yes.
They should be seeking these out because these are career enhancers as opposed to this seems like more work.
I just want to say thank you for having me as a guest. I have to cut out early because I have to make another meeting, but thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. You know, you have a slide. I mean, you don't have to stay, but it's just, can you go through the slide? There's something that crossed my mind. Like, okay, this one. Sometimes it's very difficult to define, right? I mean, we review those syllabus. I have sometimes difficulties. It's like, well, what is it exactly? This type of thing. And remember, I talked about that with Marina. I said, well, what is that really? But I'm wondering, and that's just something that crossed my mind. I'd never seen this diagram before. I read the paper, but I never could. But will that be also a way to identify, you know, by asking the faculty, well, are you kind of, you know, focusing on openness, engagement, persistent creativity, and say, what are you doing for creativity? What are you doing for flexibility, for responsibility? You see what I mean? Like a table. And if I say, yes, my students are engaging, let's say, volunteering for that. Persistence is evaluated this way. See, I wonder if we could also approach it this way and then merge both. Especially when we could not identify anything in the syllabus. So a lot of people we didn't really know, right? I mean, so we're still working on it. I'm wondering if that will be a way. Think about that, Anna, and everybody. But I know they're always working on that. So I was wondering.
We have a question from Leslie.
Hi, thank you. My apologies if this was covered earlier, but there's a lot of really good information on these slides. Will they be shared with us?
Yes, we will. The office that the academic equity will just make sure we have that, and then we will share with everybody that attended online or here, and then we will still keep it on the website so anybody can have the information. And so people visit our website.
Thank you.
It's just like but we will. Yes, definitely, Leslie. Thank you. This is really bugging. Do we have any other questions? Do we have
Diane, is it possible maybe for that survey, right? Especially community engagement course designation, that survey, we have a sample example or something. Yeah, if we have one, we can definitely share with our faculty.
Yes.
Because they definitely need to assessing the possibility. I think we probably have a lot of courses.
That's what I think.
Can do that.
And then we just don't know yet.
We just don't know
Yeah.
how challenging and what are the requirements. Then
Sure.
if there's an example or sample, we can definitely share with our faculty.
That would be great. That would be great.
Right. Yeah, just
because we just did an analysis about all the experiential learning, what components you provided in your class.
Exactly.
We have quite a lot of them.
Oh, we
quite a
do.
lot,
We
but
do.
They are they can possibly fit in that. Unless it's really challenging, but otherwise, because in the past I know it's community service, but now it's engagement. It's
This is different.
very
These are
different.
different pieces. Yeah.
But as valuable as you
Just
mentioned.
both valuable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same
I think
value.
we should put that on valuable for people too. Marina is excellent in doing those things for us. It's just like, I had to do it, it might not happen, but I mean, it should. Yeah, but hopefully. Well, if this is the type of workshop of information that you like to continue having, let us know. And we'll be glad to continue trying to organize things so, you know, we can all benefit. I certainly learn a lot of things. So,
Yes.
okay. Well, bye, colleague. Bye. Thank you.
For participating.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye, Maggie. Bye, John.
Bye.
Bye, Sean.
I know definitely we'll
Hi,
have more
bye-bye.